Welcome back to Lord of the Mysteries, chapters 11 through 20, revised, but still packed with all the mind-bending mysteries and occult madness. If this story were any more twisted, it'd be sliding into your DMs at 2 a.m. Expect the same dark secrets, shadowy cults, and plot twists so sharp they'll cut deeper than your last breakup. Strap in, because things are about to get freaky, and trust me, you'll love every scandalous second of it. Chapter 11. Real culinary skills. The norm is for everyone to die together? Should I be feeling blessed that I'm still alive? Klein couldn't help but shiver, the kind of shiver you get when you realize you left the stove on but you're already out the door. In a panic, he darted toward the door to catch the policeman, thinking maybe, just maybe, they'd be interested in protecting him, the key witness and all. But before his hand reached the door handle, he stopped dead in his tracks. Wait a minute. If these guys think I'm that important, why didn't they offer any real protection? They just talked about how bad things were, shrugged, and left me here. Like, is this standard police work, or are they just baiting me? The gears in Klein's head started turning at full speed. Maybe the cops were still lurking, watching his every move, waiting to see if he'd crack. That calmed him down a bit. If they were watching, he couldn't afford to freak out. Gotta play it cool, man. He slowly opened the door, and with an Oscar-worthy shaky voice, he shouted down the stairwell. You guys are gonna protect me, right? Silence. Great, Klein thought. The only answer he got was the sound of their footsteps growing fainter. He tried again. You'll totally come through for me. Still nothing but the sound of shoes tapping away like a bad Tinder date ghosting him. Klein snorted. What an Oscar performance. Y'all should really stick to police work. Acting's not your thing. He shut the door and turned back to the empty room. Guess I'm on my own. The next few hours were what Klein liked to call peak anxiety mode, pacing the room, muttering nonsense to himself, and keeping his ear out for the slightest sound. If there was an acting class for surviving freaky supernatural situations, Klein was top of the class. This right here is method acting. When the sun started sinking and the sky blazed reddish-orange, Klein shifted his focus. Melissa should be done with school soon, he muttered. Time to adult. He gave the stove a glance, then took out the revolver, because every chef needs their utensils. He tucked it away behind the bed's board, wedging it between some wooden strips like a makeshift holster. With that little paranoid ritual out of the way, he breathed a sigh of relief. Okay, police didn't barge in, no one's busting down doors, we're good. Now, mutton time. At the thought of cooking up some stewed mutton with tender peas, his stomach growled. Damn, I'm a sucker for some comfort food. He remembered how his sister Melissa would handle the dish. Simple, no frills, just hearty and good. Boil the water, stir-fry the meat, toss in the onions, salt, pepper. The peas and potatoes go in later. That's it. Klein shook his head. Man, this method's as basic as a plain bagel, but hey, it works. Being the occasional chef that he was, Klein had picked up some skills. Not chef skills, but enough to not set the kitchen on fire. He cooked 3 or 4 times a week, and by now he had some level of culinary respectability. At least the mutton won't die a second death under my watch. He grinned to himself. When Melissa comes back, she'll be starving. Perfect. Time to show her what real cooking is. With a spring in his step, he got the fire going again, washed the mutton, chopped it up, and started prepping. As for explaining his sudden burst of culinary prowess, easy. Blame it on the dead guy, Welch McGovern, a foodie who apparently hired a pro chef and loved to experiment in the kitchen. Yep, I'll just say Welch taught me. Klein chuckled. The dead don't argue. Then again, this was a world of beyonders. Dead people might just talk back, he shrugged. Well, let's hope that's not today's problem. He mixed the mutton with salt and black pepper before tossing it into the pan with the sizzling onions and carrots. Man, if only I had some red wine. But no, the Moretti family's fancy drinks budget is more like beer on Fridays. As the room filled with the scent of stewing meat and vegetables, Klein couldn't help but grin. He stewed the dish for about 20 minutes, then threw in the peas and potatoes for the final stretch. The smell? Pure, unadulterated food porn. Minutes dragged into what felt like an eternity as Klein waited, pocket watch in hand. At last, he heard footsteps outside the door. Slow, steady, the sound of someone exhausted but lured by the promise of good food. Melissa unlocked the door and paused, a look of disbelief on her face as she sniffed the air. What smells so good? Klein smirked. Surprise, surprise. She blinked at him in astonishment, the skepticism clear. You made this? Do you think I just stared at the mutton till it cooked itself? He laughed. Relax. Welch taught me how to make it. Well, his chef did anyway. Melissa's eyebrows shot up, but she was too hungry to argue. She put down her things, washed up, and came back just as Klein set the table with rye bread and the now finished stew. She took a bite, and her eyes widened. This is damn good, right? Klein beamed. Not bad for a first-timer, huh? Melissa was already too deep into the meal to respond, fork working overtime. Klein, content with his handiwork, ate at a more casual pace, soaking up the compliments and the gravy. When the plates were practically licked clean, Melissa leaned back, rubbing her stomach. It's really good. You should cook more often. Her face flushed red, and she burped softly, immediately covering her mouth, embarrassed. Klein let out a snort. I'd say that's a sign of approval. She shot him a glare, but quickly softened, still basking in the food coma. As she cleaned up, she noticed the missing condiments. Did you really use all of this stuff? The black pepper? The lard? Hey, perfection has a price. Klein winked, leaning back in his chair. Melissa looked at him thoughtfully, then finally muttered, Okay, maybe I'll handle the cooking from now on. Klein laughed. Sure, but let's just focus on nailing this job interview first, okay? Melissa gave him a quick side-eye as she rinsed the dishes. Yeah, but don't think this gets you out of doing your share of the chores. You can whip up one good meal and suddenly think you're Gordon Ramsay, huh? Klein laughed, kicking back in his chair like a guy who just won the lottery with a free ticket. Trust me, one good meal doesn't mean I'm signing up to be your personal chef. You'll get maybe one of these gourmet moments a month, if I'm feeling generous. Melissa wiped her hands and shot him a sarcastic smirk. Well, I guess I'll keep my expectations low. You know, for someone who just made a decent meal, you sure talk a lot of trash. Hey, confidence is key. Klein leaned back further in his chair, crossing his arms behind his head. Plus, once I land that job and we're swimming in cash, you can bet we're hitting the fanciest restaurants in town. No more rationing peas and bread, baby. Melissa rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress the smile creeping across her face. Sure, when you become rich and famous, don't forget us small folk, okay? Small folk? I'll be booking you first-class seats on airships to wherever you want. We'll be living the high life. Just you wait, Klein teased, getting lost in his own fantasy for a moment. Yeah, one day. One day I'll have that kind of money. Melissa was wiping down the table when she glanced at him with a raised brow. Uh-huh. Well, let's just focus on tomorrow for now. You still need to ace that interview. No pressure or anything, but our future dining habits depend on it. Klein sat up straight, suddenly remembering the weight of the job interview looming over him. Right. Gotta land that job. Otherwise, it's back to sad stews and beer on Fridays. She chuckled. Hey, I'm okay with beer Fridays. Just no more experiments in the kitchen, okay? I don't want to come home to find the place smelling like you set a cow on fire. Klein raised his hands in defense. Look, I made one small mistake once, and suddenly I'm labeled as a kitchen hazard forever? One? Melissa shot back, laughing. Do I need to remind you of the burnt soup incident? Or the time you tried to fry noodles? I still don't know how you managed to mess that up. Klein feigned a dramatic gasp. Harsh, but fair. I guess you'll just have to take over if you're so worried about it. She gave a satisfied nod. Damn right. But I'll let you play chef every once in a while. Can't crush your dreams that fast. Appreciate that. I'll be sure to stay away from anything flammable next time. As the banter faded and the dishes were put away, the apartment settled into a calm, cozy silence. Klein leaned against the wall, watching Melissa move around with her usual efficiency. Even with all the craziness happening in his life, these little moments made it all feel normal. Almost like he could forget about the supernatural nonsense lurking outside their door. Hey, Melissa said softly, breaking the quiet. You'll do great tomorrow. Just be yourself. And if that doesn't work, bribe them with food. Klein grinned. I'll save that as a last resort. With the night winding down, Klein couldn't help but think about everything that had happened recently. The strange events, the cops who may or may not be watching him, the weight of tomorrow's interview. But for now, at least he had a full stomach. His sister was safe, and things felt okay. Melissa headed off to her room with a simple good night, leaving Klein alone in the dimly lit kitchen. He glanced at the clock. Not too late, but late enough that his mind started drifting. He chuckled to himself. Real culinary skills, huh? Maybe it wasn't such a bad idea to have something as mundane as cooking to focus on. Kept his mind off the darker, weirder side of things. Stretching his arms, he gave one last look at the spotless kitchen. All right, time to mentally prep for tomorrow. Job interview mode, on. He walked over to the bed, trying to shake off the lingering thoughts about the police and all the strangeness in his life. The interview had to go well. It just had to. He climbed under the covers, thoughts buzzing but body tired, and slowly drifted off. Chapter 12. Here again. Melissa, can you not rub my nose in it? Klein muttered inwardly, feeling a throbbing pain in his head that was giving him a run for his money. The amount of content Klein had forgotten was no joke, like, where's my brain when I need it? With an interview in 2 days, how was he supposed to cram all this back into his skull? Especially with all this bizarre paranormal drama going on. Talk about a mood killer for studying. He gave his sister a perfunctory response and pretended to study, while Melissa dragged a chair over, settling in to tackle her assignments. The ambience was serene, like they were in a rom-com, until it wasn't. When the clock struck 11, they bade each other goodnight and crawled into bed. Knock! 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 A pounding on the door yanked Klein out of his dreams faster than a caffeine overdose. He squinted out the window at the first light of dawn. In a daze, he flipped over and sat up like a zombie rising from the dead. Who is it? He croaked. Seriously, what time is it? Why didn't Melissa wake me up? It's me, Dunn Smith, came a deep voice from the other side. Dunn Smith? Who's that? Klein got off his bed and shook his head as he stumbled toward the door. He opened it to find a gray-eyed police inspector, like a character straight out of a noir film, standing there. Alarmed, Klein asked, "Is there something wrong?" Dunn Smith replied with a stern look that screamed serious business. "We found a carriage driver. He testified that you went to Mr. Welch's place on the 27th, the day when Mr. Welch and Miss Naya died. By the way, Mr. Welch was the one who paid for your ride." Klein's brain did a double take. He didn't feel the fear or guilt one would expect from having his lies exposed. In fact, he was more confused than a cat in a dog park. On the 27th of June, the former Klein had indeed gone to Mr. Welch's place. And then, plot twist, he ended up offing himself, just like Welch and Naya. Klein forced a smile, trying to keep it cool. This is insufficient evidence. It doesn't prove I'm linked to Welch and Naya's deaths. Honestly, I'm just as curious as you about what happened to my two poor friends. But, I can't remember a thing. It's like my brain hit the snooze button. You sure have great mental fortitude, Dunn Smith said, nodding with an expression that was as hard to read as a math book. You should hear my sincerity. Klein looked him straight in the eye, feeling like he was in a bad crime drama. I'm telling the truth. Well, sort of. Dunn Smith didn't respond right away. He surveyed the room before saying slowly, Mr. Welch lost a revolver. I guess I should be able to find it here, right? Mr. Klein? Bingo. Klein finally connected the dots. A light bulb flashed in his head, and he made a split-second decision. He raised his hands halfway and retreated, leaving a path open. Then, with a casual chin gesture, he pointed to the bunk bed. Behind the bedboard. He didn't specify it was the bottom deck. That'd be too obvious for guests to notice, like hiding your secret stash of snacks at eye level in the pantry. Dunn Smith didn't budge, a slight smirk playing on his lips. Nothing to add on? Without missing a beat, Klein replied, There is. Yesterday, I woke up in the middle of the night, and there was a revolver next to me. A bullet rolled around like it was auditioning for a horror flick. It was as if I had committed suicide. But I guess, being a total noob with guns, I panicked at the last moment. Anyway, the bullet didn't do its job, and I'm still here. Klein explained almost everything that had happened, omitting the juicy details about his transmigration and the whole gathering thing, like a magician hiding their tricks. He was careful with his words, making sure to phrase things so it sounded less incriminating. Sure, he'd taken a bullet to the head, but hey, at least he was still alive to tell the tale. Dunsmith listened quietly, then said, "This fits what I had surmised, and it's consistent with the hidden logic of past incidents. Of course, I have no idea how you survived." "I'm glad you believe me," Klein said, letting out a sigh of relief that felt like a load off his chest. But Dunn threw in a plot twist. "There's no use in me believing you. You're currently the prime suspect. We need confirmation from an expert that you've genuinely forgotten your past or that you had nothing to do with Welch and Naya's deaths." He coughed, his expression turning as serious as a cat caught in a cucumber trap. "Mr. Klein, I need you to cooperate and come with me to the police station for an investigation. This should take roughly 2 to 3 days if everything checks out." "The expert is here?" Klein asked blankly, feeling like he was stuck in a bad episode of a detective show. "Didn't they say it would take another 2 days?" "She came earlier than expected." Dunn turned sideways, signaling for Klein to exit stage left. "Can I leave a note?" Klein requested, knowing Benson was still away and Melissa had bolted off to school. He needed to let them know he was tied up with the whole Welch fiasco. Gotta keep them from worrying. Dunn nodded, barely showing he cared. "All right." Klein returned to the desk. As he rifled through papers, he thought about the circus that was about to unfold. Honestly, he wasn't thrilled about meeting the expert. After all, he had a major secret tucked away like a hidden stash of snacks. In a city with 7 major churches where Emperor Roselle, the supposed transmigrator predecessor, was murdered, the word transmigration usually meant a one-way ticket to court. But without weapons, combat skills, or superpowers, he was no match for a professional cop. Plus, Dunn's lackeys were lurking outside like ninjas. If they whipped out their guns, it'd be game over. I'll take it one step at a time," Klein decided. He left the note, grabbed his keys, and followed Dunn out of the room. Down the dimly lit hallway, 4 cops in checkered uniforms split into pairs, watching them like hawks. Tap, tap, tap. Klein kept pace with Dunn as they descended the creaky wooden stairs. Outside, a 4-wheeled carriage stood waiting. The 2 crossed swords and a crown police emblem adorned its side, and the area was buzzing with life, like a party he wasn't invited to. "Get in." Dunn signaled for Klein to go first. Just as Klein was about to hop in, an oyster vendor suddenly grabbed a customer, yelling about theft. Chaos erupted, with horses getting spooked and people scrambling like it was a scene from a slapstick comedy. An opportunity. Without a second thought, Klein dove into the crowd, shoving and dodging like a contestant on a game show. Right now, he needed to avoid meeting the expert. His plan? Head to the pier outside the city, catch a boat down the Tussock River, and vanish to the capital, Backlund. The larger crowd would make it easier to blend in. Of course, he could also hop on a steam train, go east to the nearest Enmat harbor, take the sea route to Pritz, and then back to Backlund. Not long after, Klein found himself on a street and turned onto Iron Cross Street, spotting several carriages available for hire. "To the pier outside the city," he instructed as he hopped into one of the carriages. He'd mapped everything out. First, he had to throw the police off his trail. Once he was a safe distance away, he'd bail out and vanish like a magician. Alrighty. The carriage driver pulled on the reins, and off they went. Clop, clop, clop. The carriage rumbled away from Iron Cross Street. Just as Klein was about to make his escape, he noticed they were veering onto another road. It wasn't leading out of the city. "Where are you going?" Klein blurted out, panic rising. "To Welch's place." The driver answered with a monotone that sent chills down Klein's spine. "What?" Klein was left speechless. Everything blurred as if he were stuck in a spin cycle, and he sat up wide-eyed. Sat up. Klein looked around, dazed. He noticed the crimson moon outside the window, casting a spooky red glow over the room. He reached up to wipe his forehead and found it drenched in cold sweat. His back felt like a wet sponge, too. It was a nightmare. Klein heaved a sigh, feeling relieved yet uneasy. All is well, all is well. But he found it strange. He was so clear-minded in the dream, even able to think calmly, like he was on a mental high. Once he calmed down, Klein glanced at his pocket watch. It was only 2 a.m. Klein's heart raced like he just chugged a double shot of espresso. Okay, chill. It's just a guy in a long coat," he muttered to himself, trying to play it cool. But that gray-eyed gaze? It was like a freaking ice bath, straight to the soul. "What's up, Dunn? You look like you just got back from a bad date," Klein said, trying to sound casual, even though he felt like he was about to piss himself. Nice to see you too, Klein, Dunn replied, his tone drier than a bone in the desert. Mind telling me why you're wandering around like a ghost in the middle of the night? Oh, just taking a stroll to clear my head, Klein said, waving his hand dismissively. Or maybe I was hoping to run into a handsome police inspector. Can't say I've had a dream about you or anything. Dunn raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. You're not fooling anyone. Get back to your room. We have a lot to discuss in the morning. Fine, but if you hear any strange noises, just know it's definitely not me trying to summon the spirit of bad decisions. Klein shot back, attempting to lighten the mood as he turned to head back. Once back in his room, he flopped onto his bed, staring at the ceiling like it was about to drop some deep wisdom. What the hell was that all about? He whispered. Maybe I should take up meditation or something. This whole life thing is getting way too spicy. He tossed and turned, thoughts swirling in his mind like a tornado at a junkyard. The dreams were getting weirder, and the stakes were too high. He was living a real-life mystery, but it felt like a low-budget horror flick. Then, the faint sound of someone whispering caught his attention. Klein. Klein. It was soft, almost like a lullaby sung by someone who forgot the lyrics. Who's there? Klein shot up, heart pounding again. The last thing he needed was some supernatural drama creeping into his already messed up life. But the only reply was silence, thick enough to slice through. Klein rubbed his temples, trying to soothe the impending headache. This is what I get for binge-watching too many crime shows, he grumbled. He glanced around, half expecting to see a ghost ready to throw down in a rap battle. But nope, just him and the shadows. Guess it's just me and my thoughts, like a bad rom-com without the happy ending, he sighed. Morning came, breaking through his wall of anxiety like a bright, annoying alarm clock. Klein shoved himself out of bed and went through his usual routine. Wash his face, put on a shirt that was clean enough to pass, and mentally prepare for whatever chaos awaited him. He met Dunn in the hallway, who looked like he just emerged from a crypt. You ready? Dunn asked, his gray eyes boring into him like he was a specimen under a microscope. Ready as I'll ever be, Klein replied, forcing a grin that felt more like a grimace. Just promise me there won't be any more creepy dreams, or I might start charging you for therapy. Dunn's expression didn't change. He was as stoic as a statue. Let's go, he said, motioning for Klein to follow. Klein followed Dunn out of the building and into the chaos of the waking world. It felt like stepping into a scene from a movie, people rushing around, carriages rattling, and the smell of breakfast wafting through the air. Man, I could really go for a greasy breakfast sandwich right now, he mused. Focus, Klein, Dunn snapped, pulling him back to reality. We have a suspect to clear and an investigation to run. Yeah, I know. But can't a guy dream a little? Like, how about we have a coffee first? The kind that doesn't taste like disappointment? Dunn shot him a look that said, not happening. They climbed into a carriage that seemed like it had seen better days. Klein settled in, feeling the bumps and jostles like a roller coaster he didn't sign up for. He glanced out at the streets, wondering how he ended up in such a mess. Any idea what they'll say about me at the station? Klein asked, attempting to lighten the mood. Will I get a fan club, or should I prepare for some awkward fan mail? Dunn didn't even crack a smile. Just stay calm and let me do the talking. Klein sighed dramatically. Great. So I'm basically your backup dancer in this little show? As they rode on, Klein couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming, like the plot twist in a terrible thriller. All right, just keep your head down and try not to mention anything about dreams or transmigration or whatever, he reminded himself, trying to keep it together. The carriage rolled to a stop outside the police station, and Klein felt his stomach drop. Here goes nothing, he muttered. Stick to the script, Klein, Dunn warned as they stepped out into the bustle of the precinct. Yeah. Just try not to look too intimidating. Klein shot back, adjusting his collar in a vain attempt to look presentable. Inside, the atmosphere was tense, like waiting for a band to start playing in a packed bar. Officers bustled around, and the smell of stale coffee hung heavy in the air. Follow me, Dunn instructed, leading Klein through the maze of desks and officers, each one eyeing him with curiosity. Klein took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever was about to unfold. This is it. Time to charm them with my dazzling personality, he thought, a smirk creeping onto his face despite the unease churning inside him. But deep down, he knew the truth. This wasn't just another day. It was the beginning of a wild ride that would test everything he thought he knew. And as Dunn led him into the interrogation room, Klein couldn't help but feel that this was only the start of a whole new chapter. One filled with secrets, lies, and maybe, just maybe, a little bit of redemption. Chapter 13. Nighthawk. Plop! Klein couldn't help but take a step back. For a moment, he was unsure if he was awake or still in his dreams. Maybe he'd accidentally eaten some bad takeout. The silhouette took off his black top hat and bowed a little, saying with a smirk, "Reintroducing myself. Nighthawk, Dunn Smith." Nighthawk? One of the code names from the Church of the Evernight Goddesses Beyonder teams that Justice and the Hanged Man had mentioned before? Klein suddenly connected the dots and exclaimed, "You can control dreams? You just made me dream that?" Dunn Smith donned his black hat again, hiding his slightly high hairline, and replied with a deep voice, "No, I only entered your dream and gave it a little nudge in the right direction." His voice was deep and soothing, like a late-night radio host, reverberating through the dimly lit corridor without waking the sweet dreamers around them. In dreams, your usually suppressed emotions and various dark thoughts are amplified, making everything seem chaotic, absurd, and crazy. But they're all rooted in reality, since reality exists. For veterans like me, everything is crystal clear. Honestly, I trust the you in your dreams more than the waking version. What normal human being could control his dreams? If I had dreamed of something on Earth, wouldn't Dunn Smith have noticed? Klein was petrified by what had gone down in the dream. Yet he quickly found it bizarre. He remembered being pretty sober and rational, knowing what to say and what not to say. So, Dunn Smith only saw what I wanted him to see? Klein's mind whirled as he gained a glimmer of understanding. Is this a perk for my transmigration? Like having a special body and soul? Or was it the effects of that luck enhancement ritual? So, Mr. Smith, do you believe that I really lost my memory? Klein organized his thoughts and asked. Dunn Smith didn't answer directly. Instead, he scrutinized Klein with those piercing gray eyes. You're not actually surprised by any of this? I've met folks who wouldn't believe in the power of the Beyonders. They'd rather think they haven't really woken up from a bad trip. Klein shrugged. Maybe I've always been praying, hoping there was some power out there to help me. Interesting train of thought. Maybe you survived not just because of luck, Dunn nodded expressionlessly. I can now confirm you really lost some memories due to the incident, especially those related to it. So, can I go back now? Klein heaved a sigh of relief. Dunn slipped a hand into his pocket and walked slowly towards Klein, the surrounding darkness becoming as calm as a Sunday morning hangover. Nope, you still have to come with me to see the expert, he said with a polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Why? Klein blurted out. You don't believe what I dreamt? You've got to be kidding! If that expert specializes in hypnosis or mind reading, then wouldn't my biggest secret be exposed? The consequences would be a hell of a mess. I'm usually humble, but I'm still pretty confident about dreams, Dunn replied smoothly. However, for important matters, there's no harm in double-checking. Plus, our specialties differ. Maybe she can help you recover some of those lost memories. Not waiting for Klein to respond, his voice deepened. After all, you're connected to the whereabouts of that Antigonus family notebook. What? Klein froze, sweat starting to bead on his forehead. Dunn stopped in front of him and locking his gray eyes onto Klein's and said, at the suicide scene, not a single trace of that Fourth Epoch notebook was found. Welch is dead, Naya is dead. You're our only lead. All right then. Klein went quiet for a moment, processing everything. A missing notebook? Now this is really fishy. How did I not think about where that Fourth Epoch notebook went? Dunn nodded slightly, walking past Klein. Lock your door and come with me to Welch's apartment. The expert's waiting there. Klein took a silent breath. His heart was thumping wildly in his chest. He wanted to say no, and even thought about running. But, given what had just gone down in his dreams, Dunn would definitely have his guard up. And with the strength difference between a normal human and a beyonder, trying to fight would be like bringing a spoon to a gunfight. He must have a revolver, too. And he's probably had practice using it. Many thoughts raced through his mind, but eventually, Klein decided to face reality. All right, sigh, one step at a time. Maybe that miraculous power in my dream will kick in again. Then let's go, Dunn said in a different tone. Klein turned and followed. After 2 steps, he suddenly stopped and said, Mr. Smith, I would like to use the bathroom first. I originally came out for the bathroom after all. Dunn didn't stop him. Instead, he gave Klein a keen look and said, No problem, Klein. Trust me, I'm far more powerful than you can imagine in the dark night. In the dark night, Klein silently repeated this phrase, like a bad remix stuck in his head. He didn't attempt anything reckless. He relieved himself, then washed his face with cold water to calm himself down. Klein changed his outfit, closed the door to his apartment, and with gentle steps followed Dunn down the stairs towards the building's entrance. In such a tranquil setting, Dunn suddenly asked, At the end of the dream, why did you try to escape? What were you afraid of? Klein had an answer ready. I don't remember what I did at Welch's place, nor if I was directly involved in Welch's and Naya's deaths. If it's proven that I did it, I'd rather gamble and escape. I could start fresh in the southern continent. I would have done the same if I were you, Dunn said as he opened the door to the building, letting in the cool midnight breeze to disperse the sweltering heat inside. He wasn't worried about Klein running away as they got into the carriage. It was the same one Klein had dreamt of. A 4-wheeled carriage pulled by a single horse with a driver. The police emblem of double-crossed swords clustered with a crown was carved onto the side. Klein climbed into the carriage. Inside, a thick carpet cushioned his feet, and the place was filled with a soothing fragrance, like someone had dumped a whole bottle of cologne in there. Once seated, he sought a topic to dig for more info. Mr. Smith, what if, and I mean if, the expert confirms that I really forgot part of my memories, and that there's no other evidence pointing to me as either the perpetrator or a victim? Would that mean I'm off the hook? In theory, yes. We'd try to find the notebook through other means. If it exists, we can find it. But first, we need to check you're not cursed or smelling like demons, and that there aren't any lingering psychological problems. We've got to make sure you can embrace the rest of your life peacefully and healthily. Dunn wore a smile that was a little too cheerful for the occasion. Klein picked up on this and promptly asked, In theory? Yeah, only in theory. In this line of work, weird and twisted things can happen. Dunn looked Klein in the eye, making him feel like a bug under a microscope. Their continuation or end isn't something we can foresee or control at times. For example, Klein felt a chill creep up his spine. The carriage sped through an almost empty street. Dunn took out his tobacco pipe and sniffed it, saying, When we think everything's gone back to normal, it can resurface in a terrifying, chilling way. A few years ago, we handled a case involving an evil cult. They performed live sacrifices to please a god by making followers commit suicide. One follower was chosen, but his survival instincts triumphed over his foolishness and drugged-out beliefs. He secretly escaped and reported to the police. The case was handed over to us. It was a small mission since no Beyonders were in that cult. The deity they worshipped was just some random figment of their leader's imagination for the sake of money and satisfaction. Humanity had really lost the plot there. We only needed 2 members, with police backup, to suppress this cult. No one got off easy. For that whistleblower, we confirmed he had no lingering demonic scent on him. He wasn't cursed and had no mental disorders or personality problems. He seemed fine. Later, he got a decent promotion, married a great wife, had a son and a daughter. His dark past seemed far behind him. The horror and bloodshed appeared to have vanished. At this point, Dunn chuckled darkly. Yet in March this year, despite being in good financial health and having a loving wife and adorable kids, he strangled himself to death in his own office. As Dunn Smith opened the door to Welch's apartment, a wave of stale air rushed out, carrying the faint scent of lingering tobacco and something else. Something sour, like forgotten dreams. Klein stepped inside, his heart pounding in rhythm with the echo of his footsteps on the wooden floor. The apartment was dimly lit, shadows stretching ominously across the walls. Old newspapers cluttered the surfaces, remnants of a life that once thrived here. Klein felt a sense of unease wash over him, but he couldn't pinpoint why. Maybe it was the memories of Welch that haunted the space, or perhaps it was the weight of his own uncertain past pressing down on him. Dunn walked ahead, his movements fluid and confident, as if he were leading Klein deeper into a den of secrets. Klein followed, trying to steady his breath. The walls felt like they were closing in on him, reminding him of the dream and the chilling words of Dunn about the cult and its survivor. Could he truly escape his past? Stay close, Dunn instructed, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. We don't know what might be waiting for us in here. Klein nodded, though his mind was racing. What if the expert could pull memories from his mind? What if she could uncover the truth buried within him, the truth he feared more than anything else? They moved into the living room, where a large table was cluttered with candles, crystals, and odd trinkets that seemed to pulse with an energy of their own. In the center, a woman sat, her long dark hair cascading over her shoulders like a waterfall of ink. She wore a flowing dress that shimmered faintly in the low light, giving her an otherworldly presence. "Welcome, Dunn," she said, her voice melodic and soothing. "And you must be Klein." She regarded him with eyes that seemed to pierce through the very fabric of his being. "Indeed," Klein replied, his throat suddenly dry. "You're the expert?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I am here to help you uncover what lies beneath the surface of your memory." Dunn gestured for Klein to sit across from the woman. "This is Madame Zella. She's known for her extraordinary abilities in exploring the mind and bridging the gap between the living and the unseen." Madame Zella, Klein repeated, testing the name on his tongue. He wasn't sure whether to feel comforted or anxious. "Relax," she said, her voice soothing. "I will guide you through the process. All you need to do is trust me." Klein took a deep breath, attempting to quell the rising panic inside him. "What do I need to do?" "Simply close your eyes and focus on your breathing," Madame Zella instructed. "Let the chaos of your thoughts settle like dust in the wind. We'll navigate your mind together." He complied, shutting his eyes tight and inhaling deeply. The world around him faded, and he felt himself slipping away, as if he were diving into the depths of his own consciousness. Memories flickered at the edges of his mind, both familiar and foreign. "Now, Klein, visualize a door." Madame Zella's voice floated through the darkness. "A door that leads to your forgotten memories. What do you see?" I see a door," Klein murmured, feeling a strange pull toward it. "Good. Now open it," she urged gently. He hesitated, a cold sweat breaking out on his skin. What lay behind that door? Would it be answers or more questions? With a shaky hand, he imagined grasping the doorknob, turning it, and stepping inside. Suddenly, images flooded his mind, fleeting moments of laughter, warmth, and light, followed by shadows of despair, chaos, and screams. He saw glimpses of Welch, Naya, and faces he didn't recognize but felt an intense connection to. Each image felt like a thread, weaving a tapestry of his lost memories. "Focus on the threads, Klein," Madame Zella's voice echoed in his mind. "Feel their pull. What is the first thing that comes to you?" I see Welch," Klein gasped, the memory vivid and painful. "He's alive. We're in a room. There's laughter. And then..." The image shifted violently, the warmth replaced by chilling cold. He saw the blood, felt the terror, and then darkness engulfed him. He stumbled back, gasping, pulling away from the memories. "No," he shouted, flinging his eyes open to the dimly lit room. He was back in the apartment, heart racing, sweat trickling down his forehead. "Calm yourself," Dunn urged, concern flickering across his features. "You're safe." "Safe?" Klein repeated, incredulous. I saw Welch die. I don't want to go back there." Madame Zella's gaze remained steady. "What you saw is part of the process, Klein. You need to confront your fears to uncover the truth." Klein clenched his fists, trying to shake off the residual dread. "What truth?" "The truth about the night you lost your memories. The truth about Welch and Naya." The shadows seemed to deepen around them as Dunn stepped forward. "If you don't face it now, it may haunt you forever. You need to understand what happened. Only then can we find a way forward." Taking a moment to collect himself, Klein nodded, though uncertainty still gnawed at him. "All right, I'm ready. Let's continue." Madame Zella smiled, a mixture of empathy and determination shining in her eyes. "Very well. Close your eyes again, and we will dive deeper this time. As he followed her instructions once more, Klein steeled himself for the journey ahead. Whatever awaited him behind that door, he would face it. It was time to uncover the truth, no matter how horrifying it might be. The darkness enveloped him once more, but this time, Klein felt a flicker of resolve within. He was no longer running. He was ready to confront the past and embrace the mystery of his own existence. Chapter 14, The Medium. Klein couldn't stop thinking about it. A real medium? He mulled over the phrase as he silently followed Dunsmith off the carriage, like a sidekick in some supernatural buddy cop flick. Welch's place wasn't your average cozy house. It was the kind of detached place that screamed, "I do shady stuff in my spare time," complete with a garden that looked like it could host a seance at any moment. Outside the house, the road was wide enough for 4 carriages. Talk about living it up. Street lamps lined the road, all gas-powered, because who needed electricity when you could keep it old school? They looked like antique paper lanterns, a weird mix of cold and warmth. Light and darkness mingled like they were throwing a freaky goth garden party. Klein and Dunn strolled through the sunset-lit pathway, entering through the slightly ajar metal gate like they owned the place. The scent of fresh grass and flowers hung in the air. Real estate agents would sell this as charming, but Klein felt anything but charmed. As soon as they stepped in, Klein got hit by an icy wave that shot straight up his spine like a surprise slap. Eyes. He could feel eyes watching him. From the garden, the lawn, hell, probably even from behind the swing set. Great, Klein thought. It's one of those places? Creepy vibes? Check. I feel like I'm on display, Klein muttered, resisting the urge to shudder dramatically. Just ignore them, Dunn said casually, like Klein wasn't currently on the verge of pissing himself from being ghost-stalked. Easy for you to say, bro, Klein thought, trying to shake off the growing paranoia. He followed Dunn to the entrance of the bungalow, hoping his brain wouldn't short-circuit before they even knocked on the door. Just as Dunn reached for the door, Klein swore he saw something shift behind him. But when he turned around, it was just the wind stirring the flowers. Yup, totally fine. Not haunted or anything. Suddenly, a voice floated out from the house like it was coming from a ghost PA system. Come in, gentlemen. They walked in to find a whole vibe waiting for them. The living room was bathed in cobalt blue light from a candle that really didn't look like it was meant for calming purposes. In the middle of the scene sat a woman draped in a black robe, wearing enough blue eyeshadow to make a Vegas performer proud. She had a silver bracelet with a dangling crystal that looked like it could channel spirits, or at least win her some serious style points at a witch convention. Klein's inner monologue couldn't help itself. She looks exactly like a real medium, like the kind you'd see on TV for $5.99 a minute. Dunn didn't waste time. Daly, any news? Daly's piercing green eyes flicked to Klein for a second, making him feel like she could see right into his soul, and probably wasn't impressed. All the original spirits are gone. Welch's, Naya's, the works. All that's left are a bunch of clueless spooks hanging around. Spirits? Klein's brain stumbled over the word. So all those creepy feelings were because of ghosts? This place is crawling with them? He tried to keep his cool, taking off his hat and bowing slightly. Good evening, madam. Dunn, ever the stoic, sighed. That complicates things. Daly, Dunn said, with all the finesse of a guy asking for the check. See if you can pull anything from him. Daly's eyes zeroed in on Klein like she was about to pull out some seriously weird shit. Take a seat, she said, gesturing to a nearby armchair. Her voice was the kind of smooth that makes you think she's up to no good. Klein's stomach did a flip. Oh, shh! This is where it all goes down. He sat obediently, trying to keep his nerves in check. If this goes south, I'll need more than just luck. Daly leaned forward, pulling out a couple of small bottles. With a devilish grin, she said, Don't worry, I'll make this painless. Well, mostly. Just a little fragrance to get you relaxed, help you open up a bit. Klein's eyebrows shot up. That sounds way too kinky for this kind of situation. Dunn snorted from his spot on the couch. Don't mind her. We're not like those hardasses from the Church of the Lord of Storms. Here, the ladies can tease men too. You should understand, your mom was a believer, right? Yeah, but I didn't think she'd ever pull this kind of shit, Klein muttered, struggling to find the right words. I wasn't ready for veteran-level flirtation. Dunn laughed. Don't worry, she's more into corpses than living guys. You're safe. Daly shot Dunn a playful glare. Way to make me sound like a creep. She opened one of the bottles and let a few drops fall onto the flickering blue candle. The room filled with the smell of something that was meant to relax you, but Klein was too focused on staying conscious. Yup, definitely smells like bad decisions. The rest of the ritual was a blur of flickering flames, trippy hallucinations, and Daly dropping mystical knowledge that made Klein feel like he'd walked into some metaphysical TED Talk. The whole time, Klein's brain struggled to stay clear. Just gotta pretend I'm out of it and hope for the best. When it was all over, Daly waved him off like he'd just finished a dentist appointment. All right, you're good. You can go. Klein blinked. Wait, that's it? Yup. Dunn stood up and gestured towards the door. And remember, don't tell anyone about this, or, the ghosts might take it personally. Klein gulped. What about any lingering evil spirits? Curses? Dunn grinned. Don't sweat it. Most people walk away fine. Only about 20% of cases have side effects. 20%? Yeah, you're probably good. Or not. Who knows? Klein wasn't amused. And if I'm not? Well, Dunn smirked, you could always join us, or become a Beyonder. Then we can babysit you. Klein couldn't help but stare. Did he just casually offer me a shot at becoming a superpowered Nighthawk? Dunn climbed into the carriage. It's not as glamorous as it sounds. A quarter of the Beyonders we deal with lose control. And, well, a lot of them are our teammates. Great, Klein thought. Just great. Klein was left speechless as Dunn's words sunk in. The idea of joining the Nighthawks and becoming a Beyonder was tempting. Who wouldn't want power? But the risk of losing control? That was a terrifying reality check. Before Klein could respond, Dunn casually added, Of course, there are some lucky ones who go their entire lives without losing control. But, well, luck is a funny thing, isn't it? Klein forced a laugh, though inside, his nerves were frayed. Yeah, luck, because relying on pure chance always works out, right? The carriage ride back to the Blackthorn Security Company was quiet, leaving Klein with nothing but his racing thoughts. Spirits, mediums, Beyonders losing control. It was all too much. And yet, amidst the chaos, Klein couldn't help but think back to Daly. Did she really say she prefers corpses over men? He shuddered, not because of the ghosts, but because of how casually she had thrown that line out there. Talk about red flags. Arriving back at the company, Klein hopped off the carriage with Dunn, who stretched his arms lazily. All right, Klein, head home and get some rest. Just remember, if you feel anything strange, visions, voices, the usual creepy stuff, come see me immediately. Klein nodded, half smiling. Yeah, just the usual I might be haunted drill. Thanks, Captain, Klein said, keeping his voice steady. As he turned to walk away, he hesitated for a moment. By the way, what's Daly's deal? Is she always so flirty? Dunn chuckled, the first real laugh Klein had heard from him. Ah, Daly? She enjoys messing with rookies, especially ones like you who don't know what they've gotten themselves into. Great. So she's a tease who communes with the dead. Just my luck. Without any more words, Klein waved and headed back to his apartment, his mind still swirling with all the information he'd just learned. As he walked through the dimly lit streets of Tingen, he couldn't shake the feeling that the spirits from Welch's house might still be watching him. Every shadow, every flicker of movement in his peripheral vision set his nerves on edge. By the time he reached his door, Klein was mentally exhausted. He fumbled with his keys, opened the door, and stumbled inside, shutting it behind him with a sigh of relief. Home sweet home, where nothing is trying to haunt or kill me, I think. But as he looked around his quiet, dimly lit apartment, Klein realized something important. This was just the beginning. Chapter 15. The Invitation. A whole tornado of emotions kicked up inside Klein as he heard Dunn speak. Instinctively, he blurted out, "Why though? The Beyonders have serious hidden dangers? Like, so bad that even the church's internal cops and those Beyonders dealing with freaky stuff could snap like a twig?" Dunn stepped into the carriage, chilling in his seat like it was just another day in the weirdness office. His face, stone cold, and his tone, same old flatline. This ain't something you need to understand right now. Hell, you can't understand unless you decide to join the crew, Dunn said, not even batting an eye. Klein just blinked, dumbfounded for a sec, before sliding into the seat himself. With a half-sarcastic, half-hopeful tone, he asked, "If I don't get it, how the hell am I supposed to decide if I want to join?" It was like some cosmic joke. No understanding without joining, but no joining without understanding. Classic lose-lose. Dunn, being his usual pipe-huffing self, raised the pipe to his nose, took a whiff, but didn't light it up. "You misunderstood, buddy. Even a pencil pusher is considered one of us." Klein's mind spun faster than a hamster on a wheel. "So as long as I join as your civilian nerd, I get to peek behind the curtain, find out what's really going on with the Beyonders' mess, and maybe, just maybe, decide later if I want to jump in head first?" Dunn's lips curled ever so slightly, almost a smile. "Yep, except for one thing. You can't just up and decide to become a Beyonder. There are rules, and trust me, they're tighter than a miser's wallet." Klein thought to himself, "Yeah, if the church wasn't strict, then my name's not Klein." He leaned forward, adding some extra spice to his body language. "What about civilian staff, though? Gotta be some gatekeeping there, right?" Dunn smirked lazily, still puffing his unlit pipe like he was in some silent movie. "If it's you, nah, shouldn't be a problem." Klein blinked, his confusion cranking up to 11. "Wait, why me?" "Yeah, I must be glowing with that transmigrator aura," Klein thought sarcastically. "I'm basically a walking glow stick." Dunn opened his sleepy silver eyes, still as calm as a lake at dawn. "First off, you survived without us babysitting you. That's something most folks can't claim. Plus, let's face it, you're lucky. And luck? Well, we like that." Klein's expression went blank. Dunn chuckled softly, waving it off like a joke. All right, think of that as me being funny. The real reason? You're a history nerd from Coy University. We need brains like yours. Sure, the Lord of the Storm's followers are a pain in the ass when it comes to their views on women, but even they agree, talent is key. And that's something I agree with too. Klein raised an eyebrow, but let Dunn continue. "We deal with all sorts of ancient stuff, documents, artifacts, things that'll give you nightmares from the Fourth Epoch and earlier. Heretics? Cults? They love playing with this crap, and sometimes the crap plays back." Dunn pointed to his own head and gave a half smile. "Most of us, we ain't scholars. And trust me, even the sleepless among us fall asleep reading this stuff. We used to call in historians, but that risked leaking secrets. And, well, accidents happen to those folks." Klein nodded, processing all of this. "So why not just, I don't know, train one from scratch?" Dunn leaned in, dropping the third point like a hammer. "Because, my friend, you've already been through the ringer. Inviting you doesn't violate the big confidentiality clause. As for grooming new recruits, that's a whole nother level of headache. Most of our team members, they're born and bred from within the church." Klein mulled it over before asking, "Why the cloak and dagger stuff, though? Why not just go public and warn everyone? You know, keep more people from making the same dumb mistakes." Dunn shook his head like a parent watching their kid do something ridiculous. "Nah, you give humans too much credit. All it does is create a new wave of idiots trying to copy those mistakes, making things worse." Klein nodded as if a light bulb went off. "Right. The only lesson we learn from history is that we don't learn from history." "That's Roselle talking," Dunn said with a knowing smile. "Damn," Klein thought. "This transmigrator senior isn't leaving me any room to flex." He wasn't sure how to follow up on that one. The carriage rolled forward, streetlights throwing long shadows, casting the glow of civilization across the darkness. Dunn broke the silence, dropping one last piece of wisdom. "The judiciary has a saying, faith and fear bring troubles. More faith, more fear, brings more trouble until everything falls apart." Klein recited it quietly to himself, still not fully getting it. But the creeping fear of the unknown? Yeah, that hit home. As they neared Iron Cross Street, Dunn suddenly sat up straighter and said, "Klein, would you like to join us as a civilian staff member?" Thoughts spun through Klein's mind like a carnival ride. "Can I think it over?" Dunn gave a nod. "No problem. Just give me an answer by Sunday. And remember, loose lips sink ships. Don't tell anyone about Welch. Not your brother, not your sister, or you might find yourself in front of a special court." Klein swallowed. "Got it." Silence settled in again as they neared his apartment building. Just before he got out, Klein had a sudden thought. "Mr. Smith, what's the pay like? And, you know, the benefits?" Dunn blinked, then let out a short laugh. Good question. New civilian staff start with 2 pounds, 10 soli a week. You get another 10 soli for the risk and the confidentiality, bringing it to 3 pounds. Not bad, right? Could be worse than being a lecturer. He added, salaries rise with experience, and the contract's 5 years. After that, you can leave, so long as you sign a lifetime NDA. Oh, and don't plan any big moves without letting the Nighthawks know. Got it, Klein said as the carriage came to a halt. Where do I find you after I make up my mind? Klein asked before stepping off. Dunn chuckled lowly. Go to the Hound Pub on Bessick Street. Ask the boss Wright to hire a small mercenary squad. He'll get the message. Klein's brow furrowed. Huh? Our location's classified until you join. Sweet dreams, Mr. Moretti. Klein saluted as the carriage disappeared into the night. He checked his watch. It was barely past 4 in the morning. As the cool night breeze washed over him, Klein took a deep breath, absorbing the eerie silence of the sleeping city. His back? Drenched in sweat, as if he'd just dodged a bullet. Klein stood still for a moment, his thoughts racing. Damn, what a night! Almost feels like I've been hired by some secret agency, without even signing up for it. He shook his head and walked toward the door of his apartment building. After climbing up the stairs to the 3rd floor, Klein quietly unlocked the door, doing his best not to make a sound. His siblings were probably still asleep, and the last thing he wanted was to be interrogated at this hour. The door creaked, despite his efforts to be stealthy. Of course. Now you decide to make noise, Klein grumbled internally. He closed the door as softly as possible and tiptoed his way in. The apartment was dark, and only the faint moonlight through the window provided some visibility. He walked past the living room and made his way to his bedroom. Finally, after what felt like forever, Klein flopped onto his bed, staring at the ceiling. What the hell am I getting myself into? He thought. His mind replayed everything Dunn had told him during the carriage ride. Beyonders, hidden dangers, secrecy, and now a job offer with 3 pounds a week on the table. Not bad money for someone who isn't even a beyonder yet. But still, it wasn't about the money, was it? Klein sighed, rubbing his temples. Is this really the right path for me? Do I even want to be involved with this secret, shadowy world of theirs? But deep down, there was a spark of curiosity, the kind that made him want to dive into the unknown. I mean, who wouldn't want to be part of something as wild as this? Still, he couldn't deny that he was scared, more scared than he'd ever admit to anyone. What was waiting for him on the other side of that decision? Life as a civilian staff member sounded like a cushy gig, but there was no hiding from the dangers that came with the job. And then there was the other possibility, becoming a beyonder himself. That was a whole other can of worms. Did I really transmigrate into this world just to play it safe? Klein mused. He turned over in bed, glancing at the small sliver of moonlight cutting through his room. As much as he hated to admit it, the thought of adventure stirred something inside him, something primal. Guess I'm more of a risk-taker than I thought. Still, he had time to decide. He had until Sunday to give his answer. Time to sleep, Klein, he muttered to himself, his eyes growing heavier by the second. Maybe tomorrow, things will feel clearer. But just as he was about to drift off into sleep, the thought hit him like a brick. What if Dunn's whole speech about faith and fear wasn't just a philosophy lesson? What if it was a warning? The idea chilled him to his core, but exhaustion finally won out. With his mind in a jumble, Klein finally slipped into a restless sleep. Morning came faster than Klein would have liked. He woke up with a groan, feeling like he had barely gotten any rest. Fantastic. Just what I needed, a hangover without drinking. He dragged himself out of bed and got dressed, mentally preparing for another day. As he stepped into the kitchen, his sister, Melissa, was already there, fixing herself a cup of tea. She looked up at him, her sharp eyes narrowing slightly. "You were out late," she remarked. Klein scratched the back of his head, trying to play it cool. "Yeah, had some things to take care of." Melissa raised an eyebrow but didn't press the issue. "Just don't make it a habit. You look like death warmed over." "Well, thanks for that confidence boost," Klein thought sarcastically. "I'll keep that in mind." Melissa took a sip of her tea, her expression unreadable as usual. "There's breakfast on the table if you want it." Klein looked over and saw a plate of toast and some eggs waiting for him. He hadn't realized just how hungry he was until that moment. "Thanks, Melissa." She gave a small nod before heading off to get ready for the day. Klein sat down and started eating, his thoughts still occupied by the events of the night before. Maybe I'll visit the Hound Pub today. Check out where the Nighthawks hang out. Can't hurt to see what I'm potentially getting into, right? As he finished breakfast, Klein stood up, feeling a bit more grounded. He needed some fresh air, clear his head before he made any big decisions. Grabbing his coat and hat, he left the apartment, stepping out into the cool morning air of Tianjin City. The streets were already bustling with people going about their daily routines. Vendors shouting about fresh produce, the sound of horse-drawn carriages clattering along the cobblestone streets, and the distant chime of church bells. All of it made the city feel alive. Klein strolled down the street, his hands in his pockets, deep in thought. I've already seen how dangerous this world can be. Do I really want to sign up for more of that? His feet took him in the direction of Bessick Street, almost out of instinct. Before he knew it, he was standing outside the Hound Pub, staring at its weathered sign hanging over the door. Guess I'm here, he thought, taking a deep breath. Might as well take a look. With a resigned shrug, Klein pushed open the pub door and stepped inside. The smell of stale beer and smoke hit him immediately, but the place had a certain charm. It wasn't packed, just a few locals nursing their drinks, despite the early hour. Behind the bar, a burly man with a thick mustache was wiping down glasses. His eyes flicked toward Klein as he entered. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice gruff but not unfriendly. Klein cleared his throat, trying to remember the script Dunn had given him. Yeah, I'm looking to hire a small mercenary squad for a mission." The bartender's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened with interest. He gave a small nod and set down the glass he was cleaning. "Right, wait here." Without another word, the bartender disappeared into the back room, leaving Klein standing awkwardly at the bar. He glanced around, trying to act casual, but the tension in the air was palpable. Guess this is it, Klein thought. No turning back now. Chapter 16, Rat Baiting with Dogs. Phew, I finally survived that round with the medium. That was more intense than trying to finish a hangover pizza. Klein let out a deep breath, like he was exhaling the weight of the world, or at least last night's questionable street food. He slowly turned around, enjoying the cool breeze of the night that felt like it was trying to whisper, "Yeah, man, you're doing fine." He strolled closer to his apartment building's door. Reaching for his keys, he slid the right one in and gave it a gentle twist. The door creaked open like some haunted mansion entrance, only less dramatic and more like, "I need WD-40. The cold air in the stairwell hit him, making him feel like the universe gave him a few bonus hours. He quickened his pace because, let's be real, nobody wants to loiter in a creepy dark hallway longer than necessary. But just as Klein opened his apartment door, he froze. Sitting at his desk, silently judging like a ghost ready to complain about rent prices, was Melissa Moretti. Yup, she's got the whole package. Reddish black hair, those bright brown eyes, and that delicate face that screams, "I'll know if you're lying, so don't even try." "Klein, where were you?" Melissa asked, her eyebrow lifting like she'd caught him sneaking in past curfew. Without even letting him explain, she kept going. "I got up to go to the bathroom, and you weren't home." Her tone was a mix of curiosity and that terrifying sisterly instinct to sniff out secrets like a detective. Klein's brain went into overdrive like a pro. He'd lied to his parents before, so this was nothing. He plastered on a smile and said, "I woke up and couldn't fall back asleep. Instead of wasting time tossing and turning, I decided to train my body. You know, run a few rounds. Look at my sweat." And with that, he did a half turn, proudly pointing to his back like he was auditioning for a deodorant commercial. Melissa, ever the queen of low enthusiasm, stood up, took a half-hearted glance, and after a moment's deliberation said, "Klein, honestly, don't stress. You'll get into Tianjin University. And if you don't, well, there are other places." She threw that last part in like it was a consolation prize at a spelling bee. What interview? Klein thought to himself but nodded anyway. Yeah, I know. He didn't mention the offer he received because, well, he hadn't made up his mind about joining that shady-sounding team yet. Melissa suddenly pulled out something that looked like a junkyard project, a tortoise-like contraption made of gears, springs, and rusted iron. After winding it up, the little beast started doing its thing. Ka, 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 dum, dum, dum. It danced like it was auditioning for a robot circus. Whenever I'm irritated, I watch this. It works. You should try it, Melissa said, her eyes lighting up like she just handed him the cure for all life's problems. Klein, being the good big brother, didn't argue. He waited for the tortoise to stop moving and smiled. Yep, simplicity and regularity really do help relax. He pointed to the thing and casually asked, "Did you make this yourself? When?" "I used scraps from school and some junk I found on the streets." "Finished it 2 days ago," Melissa replied, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Damn, that's impressive," Klein said, genuinely in awe. As someone who struggled with basic Lego sets as a kid, this was mind-blowing. Melissa, not one for showing off, shrugged and said, "It was okay." Klein grinned. "Being too humble is bad for your health, sis. By the way, this is a tortoise, right?" Cue the awkward silence. Melissa's smile disappeared as she dropped a bombshell, her voice as eerie as the crimson night outside. "It's a puppet." "Puppet?" Klein was caught off guard, trying to force a smile. Maybe it's the materials? They're too basic." Desperate to change the subject, Klein blurted, "Why'd you go to the bathroom in the middle of the night? There's a toilet right here. Plus, don't you sleep till dawn like a hibernating bear?" Melissa blinked, clearly not expecting that. Just as she was about to answer, a loud gurgling sound erupted from her stomach, like an angry monster demanding tribute. I'm going back to bed," she said, grabbing her tortoise thingy and rushing to her room. The door slammed behind her like she was fleeing from her own digestive system. Klein chuckled to himself. "Too much dinner, huh?" He shook his head, sat down at his desk, and began pondering Dunsmith's invitation under the cold, crimson moonlight. And just like that, Klein made up his mind. Tomorrow, he'd join the Nighthawks. But first, breakfast. Klein stared at the sign. Blackthorn Security Company. The name felt almost too professional. Like they weren't just mercenaries for hire, but some respectable corporate force, when really, he was pretty sure they were just glorified bouncers with swords and guns. He shook his head and made his way inside. The hallway was dimly lit, with old wooden floorboards creaking underfoot, reminding him that this building had probably seen better days. At the front desk, a young man barely in his 20s sat lazily, chewing on something, looking like he hadn't given a single damn about life in weeks. I'm here to see Mr. Dunsmith," Klein said, adjusting his tie nervously. The receptionist barely glanced up, his mouth working slowly like a cow chewing cud. "Upstairs, second floor," he muttered, pointing with the vaguest of gestures. Klein nodded and climbed the staircase, each step groaning under his weight. He found himself in front of a heavy door labeled Office of Dunsmith. Before he could knock, the door opened. Dunsmith stood there, his gray eyes calm and a little tired, like he hadn't had a good night's sleep in years. "Klein," Dunn greeted, stepping aside. "Come in." Klein walked into the room. It wasn't grand or anything. A modest office with a wooden desk, a few chairs, and a window that let in just enough sunlight to keep the room from feeling like a dungeon. "So you've made your decision?" Dunn asked, leaning back against his desk, arms crossed. Klein hesitated for a moment. His mind raced through everything he'd considered, the risks, the restrictions, the lack of freedom, but also the potential safety and knowledge being a part of the Nighthawks could bring him. Not to mention, he'd have access to the mystical world of Beyonders, which was his ultimate goal. "Yeah," Klein said with a deep breath. "I've made up my mind. I'll join as civilian staff." Dunn smiled faintly. "You're making the right choice, Klein. The world isn't as simple as it seems, and being part of something larger can help you navigate through it." Klein nodded, though internally, he wasn't entirely sure if Dunn's words were as reassuring as they were meant to be. He had seen the dangers firsthand. The bizarre rituals, the spirits, and the sheer unpredictability of the supernatural world. It was a lot to take in. But at least, as part of the Nighthawks, he'd have a better chance of not getting himself killed by some rogue spirit or mystical creature. "All right, let's get you officially signed up. There are some formalities, but nothing too complicated," Dunn said, pushing off the desk and heading toward a cabinet on the far side of the room. "Formalities?" Klein asked, raising an eyebrow. Dunn pulled out a thick leather-bound book and a quill that looked like it had seen better days. "Just a little paperwork," he said with a slight grin, handing Klein the book. Klein took it, the weight of the book heavier than he expected, and opened it to see pages filled with names, dates, and what seemed like strange markings next to each. He flipped through the pages, stopping at an empty one. "Sign your name," Dunn said, handing him the quill. Klein hesitated for just a moment, then dipped the quill into the inkwell and wrote his name in flowing letters. Klein Moretti. The ink seemed to shimmer for a moment before settling into the paper. Klein stared at it, feeling a strange sense of finality. There was no turning back now. "Welcome to the Nighthawks," Dunn said with a nod, extending his hand. Klein shook it, his grip firm despite the slight tremor in his hand. As they released their handshake, Dunn's face turned serious. "Just remember, Klein, once you're in, you're in. We deal with the things that lurk in the dark, and sometimes the dark isn't just out there, it's in here." He tapped his temple with a knowing look. Klein forced a smile. "Yeah, I figured as much." With that, Dunn handed him a small silver badge. It was simple, with the symbol of the Evernight goddess etched into the center. "Wear this when you're on duty," Dunn explained. "It'll identify you as part of the church's civilian staff." Klein nodded and pocketed the badge, feeling its cool weight against his palm. It wasn't much, but it felt like a small shield between him and the unknown dangers he would surely face. "All right, Klein," Dunn said, clapping his hands together. "I'll show you around and introduce you to the rest of the team." Klein followed him out of the office, feeling like he had just signed up for something far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. And the worst part? He didn't know if he should be excited or terrified. Maybe a little bit of both. As they walked through the dimly lit hallways of Blackthorn Security Company, Klein's mind drifted back to the rats in the cage, the black dog snapping its jaws. He couldn't help but wonder if, in joining the Nighthawks, he had just become one of those rats, trapped in a cage, with dangers lurking all around, just waiting for the right moment to pounce. Chapter 17. Special Operations Department, Blackthorn Security Company. Klein looked at the signboard and felt a wave of confusion, but at the same time he thought, yeah, that makes sense, I guess. Man, what do I even say about this? He shook his head and chuckled before walking up the steps and knocking gently on the half-open door. He wasn't trying to startle anyone, at least not yet. Knock, knock, knock. The sound echoed all rhythmically, like some suspenseful horror movie, but instead of a creepy jump scare, Klein got nothing, just some faint sputtering sound in the background. All right, let's try that again. Maybe I wasn't annoying enough the first time. Knock, knock, knock. Still nothing. He rolled his eyes and pushed the door open wider, taking in the scene inside. A classic sofa that looked like it had seen better days, probably from entertaining way too many drunks. An armchair that might have been comfortable if you were a stuffed teddy bear, and a wooden coffee table that had definitely been kicked one too many times. Behind the desk sat a girl with brown hair, her head drooping like she was on a nap marathon. Seriously? Security company? This looks like the kind of place where they don't even bother pretending to work. It's like they skipped the whole professionalism thing and went straight to, we're on break forever. Klein walked closer, muttering in his head, and knocked on the table right next to the girl's ear. Knock, knock! The girl jolted upright like someone had zapped her. She quickly grabbed a newspaper and covered her face like that was going to erase the embarrassment. Tingen City Honest Paper. Well, if honesty includes sleeping on the job, then yeah, spot on. The steam train service Soaring Express is now running to Constant City. Oh, come on! When are they going to build one straight to Brindisi Bay? I swear if I have to take another ship, I'll lose my mind. That ride is a nightmare. The brown-haired girl read aloud, clearly trying to act casual. She lowered the paper to reveal her bright forehead and those light brown eyes that screamed, "Oops, busted." Hey, who are you?" she asked, trying not to look too panicked. "Hello, I'm Klein Moretti, and I'm here at the invitation of Dunn Smith," Klein said, taking off his hat and bowing slightly, all polite-like. The girl, who looked to be in her early 20s, was rocking a light green Lone-style dress, complete with lace detailing that probably took hours to sew. Fancy, but, maybe not the best choice for this dusty, sleepy office. "The captain, huh? All right, hang tight. I'll go grab him." She jumped up and disappeared into a nearby room without even offering Klein a drink. Not even a glass of water? Come on, I've seen better service from a vending machine. Klein smirked and settled in to wait. A few minutes later, the girl came back out with a bright smile, clearly refreshed from her break. Mr. Moretti, come with me. The captain's on duty at the Chanis Gate and can't leave. Chanis Gate, huh? Sounds fancy. What are they, guarding treasure? Or maybe it's just the employee break room. Following her down a narrow corridor, Klein took in the surroundings. Some offices with tightly shut doors and others where people hammered away at typewriters. The place felt like a mix between a detective agency and a museum of forgotten office furniture. At one point, Klein spotted a familiar face, that young officer who had investigated his apartment. Dude had black hair, blue eyes, and the whole I'm too cool for this job vibe going on. And his shirt, untucked, wrinkled, total I just rolled out of bed style. Dude must be a poet on the side or something, or just really, really bad at laundry. Klein gave him a nod, which the guy returned with a lazy smile. The brown-haired girl opened a door at the end of the hall and pointed down some stairs. We've got to head down a few levels, she chirped. The stairs were lit by gas lamps, making the place feel like a cozy dungeon. Klein followed behind her as she carefully picked her way down the steps. I've been walking these stairs for years, but I'm always scared I'll trip and roll down like a barrel. You don't know, Leonard did that once. Dude tried to rush down when he first got his powers and bam, instant cartwheel, she snickered. That guy you just nodded at? That was him 3 years ago. Oh, and by the way, I've been with the Nighthawks for 5 years now. I joined when I was 17. Great, she's talking my ear off already. But Klein just smiled and nodded as he mentally prepared for another staircase story. Ah, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Roseanne. My dad was a Nighthawk too, but well, he died in an accident 5 years ago. So I guess we're kind of colleagues now. Not teammates though, since we're not beyonders. Colleagues. Girl, I haven't even signed anything yet. Slow down with the labels. Let's hope so, but it all depends on what Mr. Smith says, Klein responded while eyeing the stone walls, damp with condensation. Why do I feel like we're about to enter a medieval crypt? Roseanne babbled on. Don't worry, if you've gotten this far, the captain probably likes you. But man, he scares me. He's so fatherly, but I don't know, he's still terrifying. Klein cracked a grin. Being scared of your dad? That's pretty standard. True. Roseanne chuckled as they rounded a corner. By the time they reached the bottom, the place had gone full-on creepy basement. Gas lamps flickered on either side of the stone aisle, casting long shadows, and every few steps, Klein spotted a dark sacred emblem of the Evernight goddess. The whole setup was weirdly calming, like some underground temple. Roseanne finally shut up for a minute, the silence as thick as the air down here. Eventually, they reached an intersection, and she pointed out the paths. That way leads to St. Selena Cathedral. Over there's the armory, storeroom, and archives. And straight ahead, that's the Chanis Gate. St. Selena Cathedral? Wait, this place is just behind Red Moonlight Street? Klein kept quiet, pretending like this was all normal as they passed the intersection and approached the gate. It was a massive, cold chunk of black iron, adorned with 7 sacred emblems, basically saying, "Don't mess with me," in iron language. Chanis Gate, Roseanne said, giving a little point. Captain's in that room right there. You can go in. Thanks. Klein gave a polite nod, taking a deep breath before knocking on the door. Knock, 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 knock. Come in, came Dunsmith's deep, fatherly voice. Klein gently opened the door, revealing a sparse room with just a table and 4 chairs. Dunn sat there, wearing the same black coat from the previous night, looking like he hadn't left the office in days. He was casually reading a newspaper, and, of course, a gold watch chain gleamed against his chest. Fancy, Captain! Real fancy. Have a seat, Dunn said, folding up the paper. So, have you made up your mind? Sure you want to join the merry little band of ours? Klein took off his hat, placed it over his chest with the grace of a man about to make a life-or-death decision, which, honestly, this probably was, and sat down. Yes, Captain, I'm certain. Great. So here's the paperwork. Oh, don't mind the fact we still call it a deed. Some people like to call it a contract these days. Dunn chuckled as he pulled out 2 copies from the drawer. Klein took the contract and skimmed it. Most of the clauses Dunn had already mentioned. Confidentiality, the tribunal court of the Evernight goddess for violators, so no slacking off, not unless he wanted a one-way ticket to Judge Judy, Divine Edition. 5 years? Damn, that's longer than most people's marriages. Klein smirked inwardly as he read on. The pay wasn't bad either. £2 and 10 soli a week, with an extra 10 soli for the whole risk of supernatural death thing. Good to know they're paying for the fun of possibly losing my mind. Looks good to me, Klein said resolutely, reaching for the dark red fountain pen. Great. Go ahead, sign your life away, Dunn said with a grin that was probably supposed to be reassuring. Klein tested the pen on a scrap of paper. Always good to make sure your name doesn't come out looking like a toddler's scribble. And then signed both copies of the contract with a firm hand. Klein Moretti. Since he didn't have a fancy personal stamp yet, he slapped his thumbprint on it like a caveman. Dunn took the contract back, stamped it with an official seal, and then handed Klein his copy. Well, no going back now. Welcome to the freak show. Dunn stood up and extended his hand. Welcome aboard. Just remember, the contract itself is confidential too. Klein shook his hand, feeling the weight of the decision fully settle in. So, do I call you captain from now on? Yep, Dunn confirmed with a fatherly smile, though those gray eyes of his still looked like they could see right through a person. After they sat back down, Klein glanced at the stamp on the contract. Nighthawk Squad, Tinjin City, Awa County, Lone Kingdom. He chuckled, finally addressing the elephant in the room. I gotta say, I can't believe you guys are rolling with Blackthorn Security Company as your cover. Dunn snorted, pulling out yet another piece of paper. Oh, we've got plenty of aliases. He passed the paper to Klein. The document was stamped by the city government and police department, stating 7th Unit, Special Operations Department, Awa County Police, Lone Kingdom. The first 4 units are regular police. You know, dealing with normal folks, keeping VIPs safe, guarding important places, that sort of thing. But starting from Unit 5, that's where we handle the spicy stuff. Unit 7, that's us, handles all supernatural incidents involving Evernight goddess followers in Tinjin. We've got the North, West, and Golden Indus region under our watch. Klein raised an eyebrow, intrigued. And the other areas? Unit 6, part of the mandated Punisher Squad, handles the Pier, East, and South areas. They're under the Church of the Lord of Storms. As for the university and the suburbs, those are Unit 5's turf, run by the Machinery Hivemind Squad. Klein nodded, absorbing all the info. He then couldn't help but laugh. What happens if someone actually comes here thinking it's a legit security company? You know, to hire us for some mundane job? Dunn grinned, clearly amused. We take the job, of course. Why not? As long as it doesn't interfere with our regular work. Plus, whatever we make from those gigs counts as a bonus, so the crew doesn't mind. Though, truth be told, most of those small-time jobs like finding lost dogs and cats have been snapped up by private detectives. Klein chuckled. Of course, who'd want to hire the Nighthawks for lost pets? So, how many people are in the Nighthawk Squad? Klein asked. Not too many Beyonders to go around. In all of Tinjin City, we've got 6 official members, including me. As for civilian staff, well, that makes 6 too, including you, Dunn replied. Klein hummed thoughtfully, but there was still one burning question that he had to ask. Leaning forward slightly, he lowered his voice. Captain, what did you mean by Beyonders losing control? How does that happen? Chapter 18, Origin and Cause. I've kept the content intact, but added some adult humor and slang to give it a little spice for the 18-plus audience. Chapter 18, Origin and Cause. Upon hearing Klein's question, Dunn leaned back, looking like the tired dude who's seen too much. He glanced out of the window towards the corridor leading to Chanis Gate, whipped out his pipe, and stuffed it with tobacco and mint leaves. Because, apparently, you can't be mysterious without smoking something minty fresh. Taking a whiff like it was his last breath of sanity, his voice took on that reflective, drifting tone people get when they're about to drop some heavy lore on you. Only at home can I enjoy the beautiful flavors of tobacco mixed with mint leaves, without any worries. Klein, you ever heard of the creation myth? Klein, trying to play it cool but also not too confident, said, Of course. I picked that up in Sunday school when I was a kid. They taught us to read using the revelation of Evernight. You know, the Book of Wisdom, letters from the saints, that kind of jazz. Creation myth went something like this. Klein dug into his memory like it was an old junk drawer, then slowly recited. The creator woke up from chaos like someone after a weekend bender, shattered the darkness, and boom! First light. Then he decided to go all in and become the universe. Dude went hardcore. His body became the land and stars. One eye became the sun, and the other, well, that was the crimson moon. Some of his blood became the seas and rivers. Basically, he went full on, one with everything. Klein paused for a moment, maybe because this all sounded like a fever dream, or because it was suspiciously similar to some old Chinese myth about Pangu. Either way, the imagination of people across different worlds always seemed to blend in weird ways. Dunn, sensing Klein's confusion, gave a small chuckle. Let me take it from here, rookie. His lungs? They became the elves. His heart? Giants. Liver? Traints. Brain? Dragons. Kidneys? Feathered serpents. Even his hair turned into phoenixes. Man, even his ears got in on the action, turning into demonic wolves. But hold up, it gets better. His mouth and teeth became mutants. And the leftover bodily fluids? Yeah, those turned into sea monsters. Naga, to be exact. The guy didn't waste a single drop. Klein tried not to snicker, but couldn't help feeling like he was listening to the world's weirdest anatomy lesson. Right, then there were the evil parts of his body, devils, evil spirits, and all the baddies. Klein shook his head, trying to hold back the laughter. It was like one of those kids' songs where everyone sits in a circle and adds something ridiculous. Dunn continued, unfazed. And from his spirit came the eternal blazing sun, the lord of the storms, and the god of knowledge and wisdom. That was the chaos epoch, good old first days of existence. And of course, humanity was born out of his wisdom. Klein chipped in, finishing the thought. Yup, and that was the first epoch, the chaos epoch. But Klein couldn't help it. He found it all absurd. This myth was so detailed it felt like a cosmic grocery list. Dude's got parts of his body for everything. He could practically see ancient people sitting around, making this up just to pass the time. But Klein suddenly had a thought that didn't sit right. Wait, hold on a second. Why are the eternal blazing sun, the lord of storms and the god of knowledge and wisdom born directly from the creator's spirit, but the Evernight goddess isn't, he asked, furrowing his brow. This mythology was starting to feel like it was playing favorites. Dunn, ever the cool customer, asked, repeat the goddess's full title. Klein blinked. The Evernight goddess is nobler than the stars and more eternal than eternity. She's also the Lady of Crimson, the Mother of Secrets, the Empress of Disaster and Horror, and the Mistress of Calm and Silence. Klein rattled off the names like a list of over-the-top wrestling titles. What does Lady of Crimson symbolize? Dunn asked, gently nudging Klein towards the answer, like a teacher watching a student try to solve basic math. Klein's light bulb clicked. The red moon. Then it hit him harder. Oh, the red moon came from the creator's eye. Dunn and Klein shared a knowing smile. Yeah, turns out the Evernight goddess was more badass than he initially thought. She came from the creator's freaking eye. No wonder she's a big deal. Dunn continued, his pipe now a prop for his philosophical musings. Humanity, born from the creator's wisdom, has brains for days but didn't get any of the cool magic powers the other races got. But hey, we made do. We figured out that we could gain power by using bits and pieces of dragons, devils, and other magical creatures, basically making potions out of monster parts like we were crafting RPG items. Klein nodded along, thinking, so humans figured out how to hack the system. Dunn smirked and said, of course, this didn't come without consequences. There are 3 outcomes to guzzling high-grade potions. Mental breakdown, personality shifts, or... Dunn paused dramatically, sipping his coffee. Want some? It's Fermo coffee. Bitter, but leaves a great aftertaste. Klein waved him off. I'm good. What's the 3rd outcome? Mental disorder, straight-up madness. We call it losing control. Dunn emphasized the words like he was describing the worst hangover of all time. Without missing a beat, Dunn went on to describe how over time, the potion system was perfected, forming sequences, each one stronger than the last. He also mentioned something Klein latched onto. Blasphemy slate? That sounds ominous, Klein muttered. Dunn nodded gravely. Yeah, it's some sketchy stuff. If you ever come across it, report it immediately. No heroics. After dropping that bombshell, Dunn leaned in and gave Klein the lowdown on the other types of losing control, wrapping it up with a bleak statement from the founder of the Nighthawks, Archbishop Chanus. We're guardians, sure, but we're also miserable wretches, constantly fighting against madness. Klein sat back, trying to process everything. The more he learned, the clearer it became. This world wasn't for the faint of heart. Klein listened carefully, trying not to let the weight of all this overwhelming information crush him like a hangover after a weekend bender. Dunn's whole vibe, calm, seasoned, and sipping his coffee like a guy who's seen it all, made the entire conversation feel like a masterclass in how not to lose your damn mind while being a beyonder. So, Dunn, Klein said, rubbing his chin, you mentioned 5 types of losing control. You've already given me 4. Mental death, personality changes, mental disorder, and that whole not mastering powers before consuming the next potion thing. What's the last one? What's the 5th type? Dunn's lips curled into a grin, but there was no humor in it, just grim reality, like he was about to drop the final hammer. The 5th kind is the sneakiest, most common reason for losing control. Klein felt a shiver crawl up his spine, like someone just whispered a bad omen into his ear. For beyonders, Dunn began, staring into Klein's eyes with those tired, gray pupils, the more powerful you become, the more enhanced your spiritual perception gets. It's like turning up the volume on a radio you can't turn down. The smaller your sequence number, the louder the whispers in the dark become. You start hearing things others can't, seeing things you shouldn't, and you're constantly haunted. Dunn leaned back, taking another slow puff of his pipe. Klein couldn't help but think, haunted? Damn, that's the last thing I need. Ghosts whispering at 3 a.m. when I'm trying to sleep. Dunn continued, his tone heavy. You'll face constant temptation. Voices and visions will try to lure you off your path, feed your desires, and push you toward madness. If you're not careful, one day you'll look in the mirror, and the person staring back at you won't be you anymore. It'll be something darker, twisted, lost to control. Klein swallowed hard, trying to shake off the dread clawing at his insides. So, beyonders are just walking targets for these whispers? Dunn nodded, his expression serious. The more you hear and see, the harder it gets to block out the noise. Greed, ambition, fear, they're all doorways leading to the same path. Lose control, and you'll never find your way back. Klein slumped back in his chair, absorbing it all. So what you're telling me is we're basically juggling chainsaws, blindfolded, and if we screw up, we either go nuts or end up as some horror story monster. Pretty much, Dunn said with a dry chuckle. Welcome to the life of a beyonder. Klein sighed, feeling the weight of the Nighthawk's mission press down on him like an avalanche. It wasn't just about fighting monsters or uncovering mysteries. It was about holding on to yourself, not losing your grip when everything was telling you to let go. Dunn watched him carefully, his demeanor calm but empathetic. Look, Klein, I'm not telling you this to scare you. I'm telling you this so you understand what's at stake. We're Nighthawks. We're the ones keeping the darkness at bay, but that doesn't mean we're immune to it. Klein nodded, though his thoughts were racing. Fighting the darkness, yeah, but the real fight's in here. He tapped his temple, realizing that the battle wasn't just against the creatures lurking in the shadows, it was against the madness that came with the power. Is there any way to, I don't know, manage it? Klein asked, trying to sound hopeful. You know, keep the whispers at bay, like a beyonder self-care routine? Dunn smiled at that. You could try meditation, prayer, or even distraction, but truth is, Klein, you'll need to keep a level head, focus on what's real, and always have people around you to pull you back when you start to drift. People like the Nighthawks? Exactly. Dunn leaned forward, tapping the table for emphasis. We watch each other's backs. We're all walking that same line. If one of us starts to lose it, the others pull them back. It's the only way we survive. Klein nodded, feeling both reassured and slightly terrified. This wasn't just some job where you clock in and out. This was a lifetime of fighting both the monsters and yourself. Dunn stood up, his tone lightening a little as he stretched. All right, that's enough philosophy for today. Let's get some fresh air. Chanis Gate can wait a bit. Klein, still a little dazed from the conversation, got up as well. Yeah, fresh air sounds good. As they stepped out of the room and into the hallway, Klein couldn't help but glance at Dunn. You ever hear the whispers, Captain? Dunn chuckled, puffing on his pipe. Every damn day, Klein. Every damn day. Chapter 19, Sealed Artifacts. were guardians, but also a bunch of miserable suckers constantly battling madness and danger. Dunn Smith dropped some real talk as the hallway outside sat like a frozen meat locker. The room's bright yellow lights weren't helping Klein feel any warmer either, emotionally or physically. Dunn's words kept hitting Klein in the gut like one of those punches you swear you can take until you realize you're out of breath. Dunn gave a chuckle, shaking his head when Klein just sat there, processing. What's wrong? Feeling bummed out? Did you think being a Beyonder was all superpowers and no strings attached? Nah, man, we're dancing with danger daily. Klein, feeling like he'd just been hit with a bucket of ice water, stammered. There's always a price for any gain. His voice wobbled like he was still recovering from a shock. Reality hit hard. All those cool powers and mysterious abilities he thought Beyonders had? Yeah, they came with more hidden threats than a sketchy contract with fine print. But what was he gonna do? His life was already upside down, thanks to one weird incident after another. He shoved all that fear, unease, and anxiety into a mental corner, trying to suck it up. After all, what was a little madness when life already had him on the ropes? Not to say the thought of noping out wasn't tempting. Oh, it definitely was. Not bad. You're mature and rational, Dunn said, slurping the last of his coffee. But here's the thing. Beyonders aren't as OP as you might think, especially low-level ones. You're not dodging bullets like some action hero. Guns still hurt, bro. You ever wonder why our sequences go from 9 down to 1? It's counterintuitive, I know. But trust me, you start from 9, and it's a long grind up the chain. Klein let out a small sarcastic laugh. I don't even know if I'll ever get the chance. He might be talking a big game now, but let's be real. If an opportunity popped up, he'd jump at it, even if it meant dealing with potion-induced insanity. Hey, everything's a risk. But knowledge? Knowledge was power, and right now, he needed it to figure out how to get back home. If that meant treading carefully and avoiding leveling up too fast, so be it. Klein wasn't trying to be the next Beyonder kingpin. He just wanted to survive. Plus, it wasn't like avoiding potions was going to keep him safe from all the crazy stuff in this world. That damn luck ritual still haunted him. So yeah, in his book, gaining some self-defense skills definitely beat out the potential downsides. Done. Seeing Klein's resolve, smirked. Contributions are key, my dude. Maybe tomorrow you'll crack an ancient text or give us some genius idea to solve a case. Maybe then the higher-ups will toss you a bone. Who knows? Klein gave a resigned nod. Dunn wasn't wrong, after all. Now, let's talk about your actual job. Since you're new here, I'll give you the rundown of what we do when we're not battling evil forces or keeping our sanity intact. Dunn got up and pointed the opposite direction of the creepy gates, which, let's be honest, probably led to something out of a horror story. We've got a bunch of civilians helping out with day-to-day stuff, accountants, drivers, and the like, but they don't pull night shifts. They're too fancy for that. He then added, Roseanne, Brett, and old Neil handle visitors, clean up, and keep track of our gear and archives. Pretty mundane stuff, but hey, somebody's got to do it. They negotiate shifts like it's the stock market, so don't get too involved in that mess. So, same duties for me? Klein asked, hoping he wasn't stuck on janitorial duty. Dunn laughed. Nah, you're a professional. You've got 2 jobs for now. First, I need you to take a stroll every day, walk the streets around Welch's place and yours. Wait, what? Klein blinked, wondering if he'd just signed up to be a glorified tourist guide. Dunn explained, We suspect you hid the Antigonus diary somewhere, which is why we didn't find it at your place. Your brain might have erased the memory, but your subconscious could still trigger something if you retrace your steps. Basically, we want you to go play detective on yourself. Oh, right, Klein nodded, finally getting it. This wasn't some weird scavenger hunt after all. And hey, if you find that diary, that's your ticket to becoming a Beyonder. Just saying. Dunn dropped that hint like a carrot in front of a horse. Klein nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility, but also the potential reward. Your second task? Well, you get 1 day off a week. Spend your free time hitting the books in our armory. We've got loads of stuff that's perfect for a historian like you. When you're done, you'll join old Neil and the gang for shifts. Sounds manageable, Klein said, relieved it wasn't anything too crazy. Dunn pointed at a set of ominous gates engraved with 7 sacred symbols. That's Chanis Gate. It's named after the dude who created the modern Nighthawk system. Stay far, far away from it unless you've got a death wish. Noted, Klein muttered. Those gates had bad vibes all over them. Behind those gates were sealed artifacts, super dangerous magical items that were locked up tight for everyone's safety. Even the Nighthawks had limited access to these bad boys. Some of these artifacts were so damn dangerous, they could straight up escape or influence the people guarding them. Dunn didn't hold back, describing just how bad things could get if one of them broke loose. The sealed artifacts were ranked from grade 0, holy shot level dangerous, to grade 3, still bad, but maybe not world-ending. Grade 0 stuff? Yeah, that was sealed in the Holy Cathedral, and nobody was allowed to mess with it unless they had a death wish. By the way, Dunn added as he pulled out a piece of paper, keep an eye out for this guy. If you see him, run. Don't be a hero. Just report back or you'll be deader than dead. Klein glanced at the paper. It showed Ince Zangwill, a former archbishop who went rogue with a grade 0 sealed artifact. Yeah, definitely not gonna mess with that guy. Dunn wrapped up with a check of his watch and a nod toward the armory. Now go see old Neil. He'll hook you up with the documents. The dude's a walking encyclopedia, but past his prime. He's got more stories than a library, so listen up. With that, Klein was off, knowing that life as a Nighthawk wasn't exactly what he expected, but at least it wouldn't be boring. Klein accepted the explanation and left Dunn's office, heading towards the armory to find old Neil. He was still digesting everything he had learned about Beyonders, sealed artifacts, and the internal workings of the Nighthawks. The information about the varying grades of sealed artifacts and the mystery surrounding Ince Zangwill weighed heavily on his mind. As he approached the armory, Klein saw old Neil standing near the entrance, inspecting a stack of books. He was a man in his late 50s with graying hair and a pair of spectacles perched on his nose. His appearance gave off a scholarly vibe, but Klein could sense a hidden sharpness beneath his calm demeanor. Ah, you must be Klein, old Neil greeted warmly, glancing up from his books. Dunn mentioned you'd be coming by, ready to dive into the world of documents and dusty records? Klein chuckled awkwardly. As ready as I'll ever be. I was told you're the expert when it comes to all this. Expert? Maybe once, when I was still out in the field. Old Neil smiled wryly. Now I just deal with the written remnants of our past cases and histories. But there's a certain peace in it, knowing the madness is behind me. Though you'll find that madness has a way of creeping back into your life, whether you want it to or not. He handed Klein a set of old, leather-bound books and several files. These should keep you busy for a while. Start with the basics, the foundation of our organization, the potion formulas, and of course, the sealed artifacts. You'll need to be familiar with them in case you come across anything unusual. Klein accepted the materials and felt the weight of responsibility growing heavier. The more he learned, the deeper he realized he was sinking into this world of mysticism and danger. Thanks, old Neil, Klein said sincerely. Old Neil gave a nod and waved him off. Go on then. If you have questions, feel free to ask. I'm always around these dusty halls. Klein spent the next several hours in the small reading room adjacent to the armory, poring over the documents. The more he read, the more his curiosity grew. He found references to various sealed artifacts, strange rituals, and forgotten histories. Some of the descriptions were vague, likely due to their confidential nature, but others hinted at things far beyond his understanding. His mind wandered back to the grade 0 sealed artifact that Ince Zangwill had stolen, 008, the quill. There was something unsettling about it, a seemingly innocuous object with the potential to cause unimaginable chaos. What kind of power could something as simple as a quill possess? As he continued reading, Klein's thoughts grew more fragmented and fatigue began to creep in. He rubbed his eyes and leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. The room was quiet, save for the faint ticking of a clock on the wall. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and Roseanne poked her head in. Hey, Klein, it's getting late. Thought I'd remind you before you lose track of time in here. She flashed him a playful smile. You don't want to become one of those Nighthawk zombies buried in books. Klein blinked and smiled back. Thanks, Roseanne. I guess I should take a break. As she left, he closed the book he was reading and gathered his things. His mind was still swirling with thoughts of the sealed artifacts, but he knew he couldn't absorb everything in one day. Later that night, as Klein lay in bed, he found it hard to fall asleep. The day's revelations kept playing over and over in his mind. What kind of dangers awaited him if he continued down this path? Could he really handle the weight of becoming a Beyonder, knowing the risks and consequences? And then there was the lingering question about his own involvement in the disappearance of the Antigonus family's diary. Could it really be hidden somewhere along the path he used to walk? Before he could find any answers, sleep finally claimed him, pulling him into the abyss of his dreams. Chapter 20. The Forgetful Dun. Okay. Klein gave a slight bow, adjusting his hat like a gentleman, even though his brain was going haywire thinking about sealed artifact 008. A regular old quill? It writes without ink? So what's the big deal? Does it write passive-aggressive letters to ruin your day or something? Maybe it's a pen that straight up kills anyone whose name it scribbles? Nah, that would be too overpowered. Ince Zangwa wouldn't need to be running for his life if it were that easy. Just as Klein was about to leave, Dunn suddenly shouted, "Hold on, I forgot something." Klein turned back, eyebrows raised. "What's up?" Dunn smiled like a man who definitely lost his keys 10 minutes ago. "Remember to visit the accountant, Mrs. Oriana, and get an advance payment of £12. You'll get half your salary weekly until we balance it out." Klein, always ready to be broke, still felt a twinge of hesitation. "That's a bit much, isn't it? No need to throw all that cash at me." "Nah, you need it," Dunn said, shaking his head like he knew Klein's financial struggles. "You really want to keep living in that shoebox where you have to fight for bathroom time? Think of the lady." He paused, eyeing Klein's outfit with a knowing smirk. "Also, you need a cane, and for the love of fashion, get yourself a proper suit." Klein glanced down at his discount store wardrobe, face flushing red. He was about to hit the streets looking like he just lost a bet. "Okay," he stammered, already feeling like the original Klein, someone who cared way too much about appearances but couldn't afford to care enough. Dunn, like some sort of walking timepiece, checked his pocket watch again. "You might want to see Mrs. Oriana first, though. You'll be stuck at Old Neil's forever, and Oriana's probably heading home soon." Klein, fully aware he was broke, had no objections. "All right." Dunn tugged on a few ropes, which set off a chain reaction of gears grinding together, echoing like the world's weirdest doorbell. Somewhere in the building, Roseanne perked up and made her way down to them. Dunn, always the joker, grinned at her. "Didn't disturb your beauty sleep, did I? Take Klein to Mrs. Oriana." Roseanne rolled her eyes but responded with a sweet sarcasm. "Of course, Captain." Klein couldn't help but blurt out, "Is that it?" You'd think for £12 he'd need some kind of a signed permission slip or formal request. "Nope." "Nope," Dunn replied casually, pointing at Roseanne. "She's your approval letter." "Wow, real professional, Captain. Do we just run on trust and good vibes here?" Klein kept his thoughts to himself as he and Roseanne left the room. "Hold on," Dunn called out again. "Seriously, man?" Klein forced a smile, turning back. "Yes? When you see old Neil, grab some demon hunting bullets." "Demon hunting bullets?" Klein blinked, clearly confused. "Yeah, you still have Welch's revolver, right? Keep it. With the bullets, at least you'll feel braver when dealing with supernatural crap. Won't actually help much, but hey, courage is half the battle." "Thanks for the confidence boost, Cap. Really needed that." Klein mentally sighed but replied, "Got it. This one requires a note, though. Hold up a sec." Dunn scribbled something on a piece of paper, signed it, and stamped it like it was a life-or-death document. "Thanks, Captain." Klein accepted the note sincerely, but just as he took 2 steps toward the exit, "Hold on." "Dude, seriously?" Klein turned back, trying not to laugh. "Anything else?" Dunn scratched his head. "Oh, right. You don't even know how to shoot, so the demon hunting bullets are kind of useless. Forget that. Instead, pick up 30 normal bullets every day and hit the shooting range at Zoutland Street. Also, get a badge from Old Neil, or they won't even let you in." With a chuckle, Dunn smacked his forehead and handed the revised note back. "Cap, you're killing me here. Is this a test?" After finally getting the final instructions, Klein walked out the door and turned around halfway. "Are you sure there's nothing else?" Dunn gave a firm nod. "Nope." Klein let out a sigh of relief, but couldn't help the temptation to turn around one last time and ask, "You sure about that?" He resisted the urge, heading out with Roseanne, who softly teased, "Captain always forgets stuff. Even my granny's memory is sharper than his." Klein could only smile as they walked up the stairs. They reached Mrs. Oriana's office, a woman in her 30s, fashionable with a sharp green-eyed gaze and definitely not one to mess with. Klein went through the formalities, and Oriana pulled out 12 pounds from the safe. As she handed him the cash, she casually asked, "Did the captain invite you? Because you've got some kind of special talent." Klein smiled, trying to downplay his nervousness. "Yeah, something like that." Oriana's green eyes sparkled with a knowing look. "I had a similar experience. 16 years ago, I nearly became a victim of that infamous serial killer. Yeah, the Bloody Butcher." Klein's eyes widened. "Wait, the one who butchered 5 girls? My mom used to scare my sister with that story." "That's the one," Oriana confirmed, handing over the notes. "If the Nighthawks hadn't shown up in time, I'd have been his 6th victim." Klein pocketed the cash carefully, patting his suit pocket to confirm it was real. "Wasn't that butcher a Beyonder?" "Yep," Oriana nodded, her voice steady. "He was preparing some devilish ritual when they caught him." Klein's mind buzzed as they finished up the conversation, and he headed down to meet old Neil, still half in disbelief that he was holding 12 pounds. When he knocked on old Neil's door, the old man invited him in. Neil, with wrinkles as deep as his sarcasm, looked up from his book. "Roseanne said you were quite the gentleman. Care for some coffee?" Klein declined, eyeing the water in Neil's cup. "You don't drink coffee?" Neil chuckled. "Not after 3. It keeps me up, hearing things I'd rather not." Klein nodded, suddenly very interested in the documents Neil handed over. "So what should I read?" Neil gave a mischievous smile, showing Klein some yellowed pages. "These. They're from Emperor Roselle's lost diary, filled with symbols no one can decipher. But I've cracked a few. They're numbers." Klein flipped through the pages, eyes widening in shock. It wasn't just numbers. It was simplified Chinese. Klein's heart skipped a beat. He stared intently at the yellowed pages in front of him. The symbols were clearly simplified Chinese characters, words he knew all too well from his previous life. They danced across the page in a way that made him feel both nostalgic and bewildered. "Roselle used Chinese?" Klein mumbled under his breath, trying to keep his voice steady. Old Neil raised an eyebrow but continued, unaware of the turmoil in Klein's mind. "Yes, strange symbols, aren't they? I've managed to decipher a few of the numbers, but the rest, they're a mystery." Klein forced a smile and nodded, his thoughts racing. So the great Emperor Roselle was a transmigrator too. That realization hit him like a ton of bricks. Suddenly, everything about Roselle made a little more sense. The Emperor's unprecedented ideas, his revolutionary inventions, and his odd quirks that seemed out of place in this world. But why simplified Chinese? As he stared at the diary, Klein's palms began to sweat. If the higher-ups found out that he could read these so-called symbols, what would they do? Before he could dwell on it further, old Neil's voice broke through his thoughts. "Well, you'll be helping me with this tomorrow. Today, we'll focus on the essentials of being a Nighthawk." Klein quickly gathered himself and smiled. "Of course, Mr. Neil. What do you need me to do?" Old Neil chuckled, his old eyes twinkling with amusement. "No rush, no rush. First, here's your badge and some basic supplies. You'll also be issued the standard 30 bullets as Captain instructed." He handed Klein a silver badge with the word Nighthawk engraved in intricate lettering. The weight of it in his hand felt symbolic, like the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. After giving Klein a rundown of the basic protocols, old Neil pointed him to the corner where several wooden crates lay stacked. "In those crates, you'll find some reading material. Nothing too complex for now, just basic records of the paranormal cases we've handled. You'll need to familiarize yourself with them." Klein nodded obediently, but his mind was elsewhere. Simplified Chinese. Emperor Roselle. Just how many secrets are buried in this world? As he gathered the supplies and prepared to leave, old Neil added, "Oh, and don't forget to visit the shooting range when you can. Dunn's right. A good marksman is made by expending bullets. It might save your life one day." Klein gave a respectful bow and made his way out of the cramped room, his heart still pounding from the discovery he had just made. As he walked down the corridor, the weight of the 12 pounds in his pocket felt insignificant compared to the burden of the secret he now carried. Stepping outside, he squinted at the sunlight filtering through the clouds, his mind still processing the revelation. Emperor Roselle was a transmigrator, just like me? Does that mean there are others? What else did he leave behind? Klein shook his head and muttered to himself, "Well, one step at a time, I guess. I've got a lot more to worry about than deciphering a dead emperor's diary." With that, he adjusted his hat and headed toward the shooting range. There was no telling when his next encounter with danger would come, but Klein intended to be ready, both for the mysteries ahead and the bullets that might come flying his way.